It's easy to start a newsletter. It's not easy to commit to doing one. You literally have one job, is to get people to open your newsletter. I see so many people who spend their time making their newsletter look so pretty, and then they don't think about their inbox presence. They just don't understand how much of a grind newsletters are. I was writing my newsletter the night that my son was born.
So these are like the 6 things that like could be killing your newsletter if you're starting on today.
The biggest mistake people make, drum roll, is... What's up, Louie? I want to get into something today that I am very good at, and that is making mistakes. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. It's probably one of the things I'm best at.
So why are you here with me
today?
today?
I want to talk.
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't find anyone better to do a podcast with. As a consultant, right? So I've been consulting for about 2 years with newsletters, and I've started to see patterns develop of mistakes that people make over and over again, and it's pretty consistent. People call me in, they have a little bit of traction, and then the newsletter isn't going anywhere, right? It's not growing. People stop reading it. They're not able to monetize it. I just wanted to go over a couple of these things today that I think are pretty easy to spot. Maybe they're not on your radar, but pretty easy to spot and fairly simple to fix. So like these are 6 things that you could go out and do right now.
Nice. So these are like the 6 things that like could be killing your newsletter if you're starting on today, basically.
Yeah.
Like the 6 mistakes
it's
to
either
avoid.
like, yeah, if you're starting today, like these are things that you should be thinking about. If you are a little bit into the journey and like you're not seeing the traction you like just go and try to tweak these things. And bonus, we're going to give you the fixes on all of them. I'm not just going to tell you what the mistakes are. I'm going to tell you how exactly I would fix them. Should we get into it?
Yeah, I'm thinking about starting a new newsletter, so I want to see which of these mistakes I was planning on making and which ones I didn't realize I was going to make. So hit me with number 1.
Do you collect any data on your newsletter?
I do. So I don't collect any data to subscribe to the newsletter, but what I do is after you subscribe to my newsletter, I ask if you want to join like my membership thing where you get discounts and access to a bunch of stuff. And to join that, you have to fill out a little bit of data. Yeah.
Got it. So I think you're making a mistake.
Okay.
So one of the things that I see a lot is that people don't collect data up front when they're launching a newsletter. And I mean that in a couple of ways. I think the most common everyone's talking about now is like the welcome survey, right? So when you sign up, give your email address, but also your first name, last name, maybe get their phone number, where they work, what their interests are, depending on the newsletter. And then I think the other thing, right, is like ongoing data collection. I think a lot of people sleep on. So that, I mean, kind of like those surveys that you have going on, especially if it's something where, an advertiser is asking for additional data. They're like, how many people are interested in, investing in crypto in your audience, right? It's like, go out and ask them those things. You're not going to get all the data, up front. And then I think the other thing, that I actually saw you talking about on LinkedIn this week was collecting, I guess not collecting data, but maybe like enriching or using data. So I think a lot of people are sleeping on data enrichment, right? So using something like an Apollo, or there's a bunch of other tools out there where you can take an email address or a LinkedIn profile and get tons and tons of information on these people. And that could actually save you quite a bit of worry about, doing those first 2 things, so not having to collect the data, right up front, if you can go out and, kind of enrich on the back end. So the reason I say all of this is because I think this is super important for so many reasons, right? One, everyone talks about first party data, but it's like, why do we actually want first party data? And I would say mostly, you want to know who is on your list so you can actually write to them and give them the content that they want.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the most important part from my perspective. I think what most people would say is actually the most important part is so you can go out and talk to advertisers and tell them what they want. And then having gone through it, I can tell you, being able to talk in a negotiation about selling your newsletter or selling your asset, it's really important to know who's on your list. If you're not doing it from the beginning and you're going to try to catch up, it's really hard. So when you launch a newsletter, make sure you go ahead and start collecting data right up front.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you on the value of data. I think it's definitely important, especially if you're paying for subscriber growth, right? If you're
Mhm.
going to like Meta and paying $2 for a subscriber or $3 for a subscriber, you need something that's going to tell you or give you an indication, an early like leading indicator of whether that is someone that you should have paid for or not. And you can do that with a survey. You can do that with getting them to purchase stuff or opt into stuff that only someone who was like your target audience would opt into. But yeah, I see that. I go back and forth on this. Like I've said this for a while now, and I'm totally on board with the value of data, but I have one rule that I tell my team at Sparkloop and also just anyone I work with, which is there's only ever one reason to run a survey. And that's if you are going to make the survey give you the answer that you want and you're using it to convince someone internally who's being a pain in the ass to do the thing that you want to do. That's the only reason I would ever do a survey. Any data that you can collect in a survey, surveys are like the worst way, in my opinion, to get data from people, from regular people. I think anything you can collect from a survey, unless you need it to be like scrupulously clean because you are a government agency or something, there is always a much better way to get more of that data from subscribers.
It's a fair point because I think just from like a data perspective, maybe you have more stats on it because you see this more. But from my personal perspective on the water coolest, when we run a survey, right, like I can probably get a couple percentage points of the list to actually fill that out with their data and like their interest. But when I'm doing like I could probably get 10, I think I average like 12% of people who are actually filling out the survey upon signing up for the newsletter, right? So the welcome survey, which like still is not great, but it's a lot better. But I think what you're saying is why even waste your time getting like that, 10, even if you get it, industry best 20% of the people, why not just go and enrich the data? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying like never ask a survey. Ask people a question that they want to answer. Like no one wants to answer a survey, and anyone who does is weird, and you don't want their answers. But people are happy to like share data with you if there's something in it for them. But like the format of a survey makes clear that there is nothing in it for them except like the worst thing in the world. Like here is a $50 Amazon voucher, or like you could win a $200 gift card or something like that, right? Like is the I hate those. They suck. Like the way that I think about it is like, okay, you want to know something about someone. Don't ask them a survey. Create 4 different lead magnets and make it so that when you ask those questions, you're basically saying, hey, I've created 4 really cool things. I need to know which one of these you want. Tell me X about you or X and Y, and I will send you the one that fits for you for free, right? All of a sudden, you get 5 times as many people filling that out. Like I get 50%, 50 something percent completion rates on mine. Because there's something in it for them, right? They're sharing that with you for a
Yeah.
reason, and they're more likely to tell you the right answer. Otherwise, like if you're doing it in the email, don't ask a survey. Create like a little game or something. If you want to know the answers, be like, "Hey, I've created this calculator that's going to show you, you know, based on a bunch of stuff. Like it's going to tell you when you're going to die." And those questions can be,
Mm.
"What is your household income? How old are you?" All this kind of stuff, right? Way more people are going to take that test, like that
Yeah.
fun thing, than are going to fill out a survey. But you can ask the exact same questions because they're relevant, right? So that's what I mean by don't do a survey. Is yes, enrich data if you don't need to get it from people directly, but like there are a billion ways that are smarter and better to get data from people than just asking them like a questionnaire or a survey.
Where do you do that? So you're saying you give people, let's call them, lead magnets or some sort of something useful to them. Where do you put that in your welcome email, in your welcome series, welcome email? First couple of emails they get. Where exactly do you put that?
It depends. In the past, I've put them in the welcome funnel. So I'll show paid newsletter recommendations first. Then I'll show the survey if it's a short survey, and I'll say, hey, it's completing like your registration. And B, it's going to give me what I need to be able to choose some really great offers from like the 5 or 6 that I have for you.
Mhm.
Like you're going to unlock some like relevant welcome offers for you. And when you frame it that way, and like the first question is like, what are you struggling with your newsletter? Is it more about growth, monetization, whatever? Like, oh yeah, I understand how answering this is going to help me get the answer, but it's also telling me the thing that I need as the newsletter operator to know in the future. Okay, what should I pitch them on? What should I sell to them if I have? I mean, I don't have any paid products at the moment, but if I created a course, who wants to learn growth, who wants to learn monetization, for example, right? It tells me a bunch of stuff like that. So that's how I do it in the welcome flow.
Okay, so I think where we landed on this is you need to collect data. That's a good thing, but the way to get it, we should be more clever about it.
I think so. Yeah, I think it's not. I just don't even think it's worth doing a survey. To be honest, I'm like, if you're going to do it, put a little bit of effort into it, get some good answers, make it fun, make it like an enjoyable experience that people want to do. Have just like one random question each week. Like you can have like a see where you stack up compared to the other listeners or the other readers, right? And just have like a bunch of answers if you want to do it. But at least do that and ask
how many Louis do we have on the list, right? Like, yeah. Okay, now
exactly.
your social security number. Who has the highest social security number?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I think is like it's a personal bugbear of mine. Anytime anyone asks me to answer a survey, I'm like, never ask someone to do something when you like make it clear what they're going to get in return and make it an outsized return.
So yes, collect data. Mistake I see over and over again, but I like Louis' idea. Let's make it a little bit more sexy. I think we could probably do a whole episode on that. I like that one. I want to get into the next one though. This is something that I see pretty regularly. I actually recently helped someone optimize for this, and the nice thing is it's actually it's a pretty easy fix. People are always optimizing for the wrong thing, right? So, well,
what
not
do you mean by
always.
that?
So a lot of times I'll get on a consulting call,
Mm-hmm.
and people are so excited. They're like, my open rate is 60%. My click through rate is 11%. I'm so excited. Like this newsletter is doing great. I'm like, okay, well, what do sales look like, and what's kind of the end goal here? Like, what are you selling? Are you selling your own product? And they're like, oh, well, like we're having trouble, keeping advertisers happy. It's things just like aren't going super well, and then it becomes a whole discussion about where you're getting your leads from, like how they're getting in. So one, this is like I guess a mindset shift that I like to kind of put out to people is start thinking about it as a conversation, right? So start thinking about your newsletter as more of a conversation than kind of a one-way street. And so I start actually building in, so people are, I'm not everyone's North Star to almost be like trying to get replies to your email or trying to get people to interact with your email. So I think what we just talked about, right, is a good way to do that. That's a good way to measure it. It's like it's not really a necessarily a back and forth conversation of an email that you're writing with people, but again, it's a good way to measure like this person is actually engaged and actually doing something. And so I think measuring that is a really good way to think about it. And I always go back to this one thing, and I love Tim from 1440 says this. I don't know if he still does this, but he said like up until very recently, or maybe he still does, he would answer every single email that came into 1440. And for those of you who don't know, they have 4.5 million subscribers or something, so they're probably getting hundreds or thousands of emails, replies every day, and like that sort of thing. Like I have no doubt. I don't know for sure, but I almost have no doubt that Tim is probably measuring that internally, how many people are replying to an email every day and what type of, responses there are. And I think more people should be doing that and thinking a whole lot less about open rates and click-through rates.
I like that. I like that. I'm trying to think if there's anywhere that I would disagree with that. I think
And
yeah.
now I just want to be clear. I think it's like it's obviously like a metric that I want to measure, but it's more so like I just want you to get in the mindset of you're having a conversation with these people, and it's kind of like a two-way street. I think so many people just think about email as this like one to many, where I think people should be thinking about it as a one-to-one relationship, and you're going to get a whole lot more out of it. You're going to write better content, you're going to serve better ads. Like I think you're just going to provide a lot more value to your reader, and then that's going to help with all those other things. So it's not like a fun thing or a hack, but like it's just kind of a good way to think about your newsletter.
I like that. I like that. I definitely see people optimizing for the wrong thing all the time, like with opens and then with clicks, and then another big one that people optimize for, which is I think insane to me that people still think this way, is like, how can I get the cheapest possible subscribers rather than how can I get the highest ROI on what I'm spending, which is just
Hmm.
is just crazy to me. It's like going to a bank and being like, hey, which one has the cheapest fees, not which one's gonna have the highest interest rate. It doesn't make any sense. But anyway, yeah, I totally agree on all of those things of it can be really tempting and really easy when you're starting out, and when you, especially if you don't necessarily know how you're going to monetize or when you're going to monetize exactly. Like if you're thinking, oh, I'm starting a newsletter about marketing. I know that at some point I want to sell something to my audience, but I don't know, is that going to be a community? Is that going to be a course? Is it going to be consulting? I don't know what that's going to look like yet. It's very difficult to know whether the subscribers are valuable. So you've got to find something there. And I agree, like open rates especially is a terrible one to look at because it's just so
Yeah, and I
inaccurate.
mean, we didn't even really hit on the fact that like this, like those metrics don't mean a whole lot from a technical perspective anymore, right? It's like they're very hard to gauge, and they I would say they mattered a whole lot more maybe what 4 or 5 years ago, but yeah, I would not over index on those.
For sure. Well, hit me with number three. I think I'm one no, one for two so far. Hit me with number three.
The next mistake I see pretty regularly, and I think this kind of goes into the two before it. They don't know who they're writing for. So I think a lot of people, a lot of newsletter operators and I was so guilty of this with the water coolest, right? They kind of let whoever is flowing into the newsletter dictate what is in the newsletter or what the newsletter is all about, right? So just a quick example on the water coolest, right? I started out thinking it was going to be something where I was covering kind of like news and stock news, markets news for someone like myself who was kind of like in consulting, not really in investment banking, that sort of thing. So it wasn't super technical. And then we started to get popular with a bunch of people that worked on Wall Street, and we basically like pivoted to that kind of content. And then 2020 came along, like GameStop things are happening, and we kind of went back to that audience of more retail investors, people who were I would call more kind of casual folks, and that's where when things really took off for us. But it was like I feel like we were kind of on this winding path, and I would say part of the reason for that was we never sat down and were like, who are we writing this newsletter to, right? And that would have helped us go out and figure out who we want to work with to grow this newsletter, figure out who we want to target on Facebook, what brands we want to, or what other newsletters we want to work with on Sparkloop. And so the easy fix here is truly sitting down and thinking, who's your ICP, like who's the ideal person who's going to be reading your newsletter, and think about that very, very specifically, like what keeps them up at night, what their hopes and dreams are. Like I recommend people like give them a name and show what they look like. It's kind of like the marketing 101, right? Like
Yeah.
have that
Do you
person.
buy into that idea of like some people tell me this, even some surprisingly big newsletter operators have told me that they literally write to one specific person. Like they have a person in mind that they write to. Do you do that?
Yeah.
Because I don't. I never managed to do
I,
that.
it is incredibly hard to do. It's really easy to say, and I say it all the time. It's incredibly hard to do, and I know that because I'm launching a new newsletter now. Again, like I went through it with the water coolers where I was like writing to a Goldman Sachs MD, one year, and then the next year I'm writing to some guy on Wall Street Bets, and those people could not be more different, right? But I totally agree, and this is coming from a pure content perspective, and like that's why I started with newsletters. Like I just love creating content, and you're going to create infinitely better content if you were just trying to sit there and write to that one person. And I did that with one of the bigger newsletters that I work with, and I would say we reference that more than we reference kind of like that style guide, voice guide that has that person in there very often. And we gave him a name, Alex, so it could go either way, Alex, boy or girl. And we kind of said, would Alex care about this, right? And we literally say that to each other in Slack all the time, like, would this matter to him? Would this keep him up at night? And so I'm a firm believer. It's not easy to do, admittedly, but I think it at least sets you on the right path. And you could have potentially one or two of these people who it matters to, and you can just kind of stack rank them. So we have people who, again, we have Alex as kind of like the prime person who we're writing this newsletter for, and then we have other personas who are kind of like the secondary folks that will get something out of this, but there's going to be something missing, right? It's like not going to impact their day to day yet, but it's where they want to be, right? And this is for a B2B newsletter. So it's kind of like they're aspiring to be Alex. So we have them and we think about them, but not as much as we think about him.
I like that. It's one area where I think this becomes even more important. So like you hit obviously on like if you don't know this, a lot of the decisions, like the business decisions you make are going to be, if they're good, it's going to be because you got lucky. If they're bad, it's going to be like you're not even going to know they're bad because you don't know how to make those decisions. But one area that I think nowadays is even like helps on an extra level is as you start to integrate more and more AI like stuff into workflows, being able to just reference that doc for AI and be like,
Yeah.
hey, bear in mind, we're talking like as soon as you go, you're like, hey, let's create a landing page, copy and paste. Here is like the exact persona that we have. It just makes out all of the output from that AI so much better. And you can always like gut check stuff and be like, hey, here is our persona. Like, how do you think they're going to react to this, or like this way of monetizing, or like how is this email going to work? How would you rewrite it to make it more attractive to them? And I've been doing that a lot with Sparkloop stuff recently, and it's night and day, like the quality of the output you get from AI if you can feed in like that reference point.
Yeah, it's funny. It actually makes my life easier now to get people bought in on, like, when I come in, I'm helping someone launch a newsletter, I want to write, a style guide, a voice guide. It tends to be one of those things where people just kind of like put it off. They're like, no, no, we'll get to it later,
Hmm.
right? And it's easy. Like, I did it when I was building my newsletter. But now it's almost easier to get people to do it because I use that. I'm like, well, we could just feed it into AI, right? Or like whatever tools you're building, and it's going to help you exponentially. So yes, I absolutely love that. AI is kind of a use case for that, but it makes it even more important to have those things. And yeah, we all know AI writing. It just becomes it becomes so generic and kind of like just pulling from everywhere. And like I think it was actually Matt Damon or Ben Affleck who said this, but like everything kind of like reverts to the mean with AI. And I think if you can kind of pull it away from that and be like, no, 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 don't just go to the average person what they think, but like go to this exact person, it's going to be super helpful for everything you create. To your point, whether it's writing the actual newsletter, or it's a landing page, or it's an ad you're creating for LinkedIn or Facebook.
Yeah, I love that. Let's move on. What's the fourth big mistake that you see early stage newsletter operators making?
Yeah. So this is kind of the last like technical one. Then we're going to get a little outside the box. Inbox presence. We've talked about this kind of. I think we've deep dived on this a little bit. I see so many people who spend their time making their newsletter look so pretty. They'll go out and hire an agency. It looks awesome. And then they don't think about their inbox presence. And by inbox presence, I mean very simply your subject line, your preview text, and potentially the image you're using. If you can kind of get an image, if you're doing Bimmy or something like that. But I actually tell people, kind of the quick fix here is start with your subject line and preview text. It's literally that important. With the same client I was talking about, we've started doing that. So we'll go into a Google Doc,
Mhm.
and I yell at him if he starts writing before he writes the subject line and preview, because for so many people it's just this afterthought. And you have to think about it. Your newsletter, you literally have one job, is to get people to open your newsletter. And no matter how pretty it is and how awesome it is and how great the content is, nobody's going to open it, if they do not get past the inbox, right? And there's a whole, we could do 5 episodes probably on inbox presence and writing subject lines and preview text. But I would say like the quickest fix is like fucking think about it. Don't let it be the last thing you do before you hit send on your newsletter or the last thing you do after you write it. And I think from a purely content perspective, it also just forces you to have a great idea. It's almost like the writing for one person. If you write that subject line in preview text, it can almost act as your prompt to be like, I am writing about this and keep you on the right path. And there's obviously chances that you have to change it, you have to update it, whatever. But I would say most times and with most newsletters, it's a really good practice to start with your subject line.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to hard agree on starting with the subject line. I think for me, it's like creating a YouTube video. It's like creating any content, right? You start with the hook. You have to get a really good hook. If you can't find a good hook, there's no point in creating the content. So like it has to begin there, and you can iterate, you can improve it later, but you have to start with something that's good enough already. And the subject line is the hook. Where I'm going to disagree slightly, I think, is I always hope to get to a point with a newsletter where the subject line doesn't matter. I believe that the best newsletters, they get opened, not the welcome email, I don't think, but like after that, like regular email sends, especially if it's a daily or a regular email. I think if you send like once every 2 weeks or so, the subject line becomes much more important. But if you send regularly, I think the sender name and the image is much more important. I think you want to get to a place where you could almost write nothing or you could write some absolute nonsense and people are still going to open it because they see an email from you. They go, oh yeah, email from Louis means good. Click open. I like emails from Louis, right? And I think that is where I would want to get to as a newsletter operator if I'm trying to create a really good newsletter. But I think you do have like segments of like email creators and newsletter creators where it's hit or miss. It's a topic. Maybe you like that topic. Maybe you don't. It's a different thing each week, a different breakdown. One's relevant, one's not. You use the subject line and the preview text to decide whether that one's going to be for you. But I would say those are more rare, and you generally want to like maybe use the subject line and the preview text to it helps to excite people. It helps people to be reminded of what's going to be in there. It primes them for it, like Morning Brew does with their coffee mug emoji. It's sort of it's almost like an extension of the sender name. Really, it's just reminding you of oh yeah, this is Morning Brew. So all of that stuff's good. But yeah, I'm less bullish on the subject line and the preview text. One thing I will say though is I've heard recently that there is a big shift now, right? Which is more and more of the time you will never read the subject line and the preview text because AI is summarizing it for you and is telling you, hey, Louis emailed something. And it's at the moment, to be honest, it's not very good at that. But I've heard that if you use the end of the preview text, you can add quite a lot of text to the preview text. So you use the bit that actually shows up in the inbox and for normal preview text. And then afterwards, you can add stuff to help the AI figure out how to pitch your your email, basically how to write that notification. And that could be interesting in a world where no one sees your subject line and preview text anymore. Maybe the real skill is how can you write something that AI is going to interpret and turn into something that people have to click.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically going to become inbox engine optimization, right? It's literally we're going to be optimizing for these AI summaries, and yeah, I totally agree with you. That's interesting. So you're saying at the end, so the preview text that we're already writing, it's just the end of that is people are attaching more context.
Exactly. Yeah. They're just using that space that no one ever sees because the preview text only shows in the preview and it doesn't have enough, it has more space than actually gets shown on most browsers. So you just use that space to basically just fill in a load of stuff that's going to try and prompt the AI to explain it the way that you want it to be pitched, right? To use your hook or to use something interesting rather than Louis sent email read newsletters, which is one thing that could come up, right? You want it to say Louis shares incredible new newsletter growth hack or something.
Must
right?
read.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the good news is that you can just look in your spam folder, and spammers will definitely figure this out before anyone in the newsletter space does, and how to optimize for that. But it'll be interesting if there's going to be, and I'm sure there won't be, but like a standard protocol for that sort of thing, of like how Gmail is going to use their AI summaries and how Apple Mail is going to use their AI summaries. And unfortunately, it's probably going to all be different. So we're going to have to sit here and optimize for, is 70% of your list Gmail? So are you kind of optimizing for those folks?
Yeah.
But yeah, I
I mean,
think
I'm
that's
lazy.
definitely,
I'm not going to optimize for that at all. To be honest, I'm just going to optimize for if I send a really good email and I have a really strong hook at the end of that email for what I'm going to write about next time. If you have a kind of newsletter format that allows you to do that, I just want people to see my name, see my face, maybe an emoji or something that is clearly related to me. Probably sending at the same-ish time every week or every day is going to become more important. And then, yeah, you
yeah.
skip the subject line. It doesn't matter what It's like if my wife sends me a text, it doesn't matter what the AI summary is. I'm gonna open it, right? So yeah,
Yeah, I think inbox presence is going to probably change soon. And I will say one thing about what you mentioned, in that you want people to just be able to open an email because it's from you and they know they're going to get value out of it. I just want to point out that we're talking about when people start out. So I agree with you. And I actually do that with the water coolest. Like obviously it's a daily newsletter, but our subject lines are very like funny. They're, as the kids would say, they're very water coolest coded. So it's like, it's usually some sort of like inside joke, or, something almost, I would say, similar to like a New York Post headline, right? Is the way to explain them. I think we can get away with that, quite frankly, because we've kind of earned it. It's been, 8 years and we've been doing these things. So I would say, I almost look at it as like, you need to kind of like earn that. I would say use it to your advantage at the beginning when you're trying to launch these things, get people excited about, what kind of value you're going to provide in your newsletter. And then I think you can go down more of the path. And I will say, just to close this part, I am very much team emoji in your subject line, because I think that's a really easy, I hate the word hack, but it is a hack to stand out in the inbox. And like, surprisingly, a lot of people still don't do it.
yeah.
And so I think, looking for, again, the morning brew has a coffee cup. We use like the water droplets. It's just like an easy thing to do. I don't know why more people don't. But and I would recommend using the same one every time, by the way, to build that habit.
Yeah, definitely. Is it funny you tie that back to your one of your other big mistakes you see people making, which is optimizing for the wrong thing? It's so easy to go into like the subject line and optimize for opens and not realize that like the worst thing you can do with a newsletter isn't to write a subject line that doesn't get people to open. It's to write a subject line that makes people open and then regret opening. Because as soon as you get that feeling from someone, as soon as you elicit that emotion of this was a trick or it was a waste of my time, they're not opening again. And if they like, you've lost that person at that point. So that you will get you a higher open rate on your email, but it may not have
Yeah.
been a smart decision long
Yeah,
term to do.
don't be a scumbag and don't lie in your subject line, which is actually, I think, illegal under can spam. You have to be truthful about what's in the email. So you're telling me that you don't love the like sketchy marketing emails, like "I need your help" or like "yo," or the little tricks that people use to get you to open their e-commerce emails.
Oh, I think you should use those if you're trying to build that kind of audience, right? Like, it's like I say, like what will work for, let's say, like a market beat or someone selling like stuff to an audience that
Yeah,
is maybe slightly less sophisticated. Like, if that's how you're treating your readers, if that's who your audience is, go for it. Do that, right? And if you invent one and you're the first person to do it, do that anyway, because at least it's original and you've done it. But like copying
yeah,
like Sampar's, like, hey, we did this. What
yeah,
was it like the discount thing? We shouldn't have done this email. Like,
yeah,
I'm going to send
yeah,
this out to people tomorrow. Like, Eh, you can do it. Like I feel like we can do it. Like in my newsletters, I can actually lean into that, and like because when I'm writing about something, it's normally writing about marketing, sales, newsletters, and so everyone in those spaces, that's kind of like an inside joke. They know that I'm not doing that seriously. I'm just being like, hey, I'm too lazy. I'm just going to copy this thing just for fun. But yeah, doing that seriously to like if you can't do that to an audience of like CEOs and execs and people like that and expect that to work out well for you long term, I think.
Yeah. I think also like a very broad product audience, if you're just like a general clothing retailer, you're like, like Warby Parker or something, sending out one of those emails, like, ugh, it's going to piss off a lot of people. I think know your audience.
Yeah.
But all right,
The other, I mean,
let's move on.
I'm going to give you one last hack that someone I know has used, which is a difficult one to pull off to get that inbox presence and that opening. But I know a couple of people who have names that are like the same as celebrities, and that weirdly works. And there's one guy I know whose name is first name is Jeff and his second name is Epstein, and he his inbox is like his open rates are pretty good.
That's pretty funny. And also we haven't talked about this, but have you checked out jmail.com?
I haven't checked it out, but I have gotten a
Uh
couple of those cold emails that people sent out. Have you seen those?
no, no.
It's like a cold email technique where the subject line is you like
Oh,
saw you in the Epstein files, and then
yeah, yeah.
obviously the text is like, just kidding, let's chat about like how I can send you 10 leads a month or something. I think it's funny. Like, I think that kind of thing is like, that's almost so bad that it's kind of worth doing. Like that might actually,
Well,
I'm never
it's
going to
almost
buy
like a
anything
joke
from that
now, right?
person, but I'm going to respect them for it.
Yeah. I know. It's yeah, I mean that's the other thing is like you have to know your audience, right? It's like do people want to buy from somebody like that? Like I think I could get away with that, with the water coolest. I think that if I was trying to sell something or do like a direct email, it piss some people off, but most people would think it's funny because it's us, but uh yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. We got two more and only a few minutes left.
Hit me with number
So
five.
yeah, yeah. So five. So the mistake that this is probably one of the bigger mistakes that I see people make who are starting a newsletter. They just don't understand how much of a grind newsletters are. So, like, not to sound like I'm like the guy who had to walk uphill both ways to send his email newsletter, but like I was writing my newsletter the night that my son was born, right? Like I committed to a daily newsletter. I'd sold ad spots. Like I didn't know when my son was going to be born. I was literally writing, a newsletter that night. And that was when I had didn't really have a team. And so my point being here is like, it's not easy to, it's easy to start a newsletter. It's not easy to commit to doing one. Um, I will say there's a couple fixes for this, and one is something that I recommend everybody do before they start is like whatever your cadence is, do that for at least a month before you send it to anybody, or maybe you send it to like a bunch of friendlies. So if you have a weekly newsletter for the entire month before you plan to actually launch, go through the entire process of writing it, sending it. And you could always use the content again. Hopefully, I did this with the water coolest for an entire month before we started sending it in 2017. We were just writing newsletters, and that was news. So we didn't actually get to send it to anyone, which kind of sucked. We didn't get to use it, but we found out so many issues, right? Like, and not even just content or technical things, but when you're trying to write a daily newsletter or even a weekly newsletter, it's like just finding the time to do it, right? And okay, well, are we gonna have time to get it to somebody to review it before it has to go out in the morning? Those little things are things you're gonna find out, and it's also super helpful to actually know how much of a grind it is and like, do I really want to commit to this thing? And if you can't figure out how to do it in the first month, how to send 4 newsletters if you're doing weekly, you're probably not going to make it to 6 months. And I will say the excitement certainly goes like this and it drops into the valley of despair. I would say a couple months in, when you're not making any money, it's not growing, there's little hiccups and you have to call somebody like me to help you out. But I would say just know that it's going to be a grind. So I don't want to scare anyone off from starting one, especially if you're at a company where it's not the only thing going on, a media company or a brand, and you want to launch this sexy thing. Just know that it's going to be a grind. It's going to take resources, and people will start asking questions about like, why are we spending money and resources on this thing and not getting a return? So I would just be, know that the grind is going to be there and just communicate that really well to everybody.
Completely disagree. It's easy. Go to Facebook, play with some meta ads, 17 cents per subscriber for the local newsletter. AI writes the thing, monetized through the Beehive ad network. You are going to be a millionaire. You're going to be sitting at home doing absolutely nothing. It's going to be easy. Go for it. That's
Yeah, I
my
think
take.
mailbox money.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's
You got to be in it for the love of the game at the beginning, at the very least.
so this is like podcasts, it's like YouTube, it's like any format, right? People burn out very, very quickly. They normally get like 1, 2, 3 out. Very few get to 6 or get to 10. I can speak to a little bit about like my experience of like exactly where people fall down, which is probably something that you didn't experience because of like the water coolists format was essentially like predefined. You didn't really have a choice. It's a daily newsletter like about the news. You're always going to have something to write about. Something I've always run into and that has stopped me with newsletters that I've started in the past and that I see a bunch of people tripping up on, like that is the thing that sort of like becomes more of a grind, is they start a newsletter based around 1 or 2 ideas. And so they'll write, oh, I'm going to give you a marketing tip, or um, I'm going to share like, ways to become a better manager or something. Like whenever I see one
Are
of
you
those, and
telling me that I shouldn't start a newsletter called Chief Newsletter Officer about how to be a better newsletter creator?
no, I think you should start that, but I think you have to think in formats and you have to think in a repeatable format. And next newsletter I start, I am going to ask myself, I might not write them all down, but I'm going to say, hey, what are the first 100 or 200 like versions of this? Like, can I write 200 of these with the ideas? Because if I can't come up with 100 or 200 ideas now, at some point this newsletter is going to die, and it's probably going to be sooner rather than later. So get the format right. If I'm doing a weekly newsletter and it's a marketing one, it's not going to be a marketing tip each week. It's going to be a teardown of how someone is doing, like how some marketer is doing something smart. It's going to be a teardown of headlines, a teardown of ads. It's going to be something where I'm just guaranteed that every week I can come back, do something interesting, and I'm not going to have one week that's a huge hit and the next week's going to be a huge miss because I couldn't come up with something in time and I was too busy and the inspiration didn't hit me that week. It's got to be something where the format forces you, I think. And I think more and more, like, I think that's one way that I've developed in sort of content creation just in general in the last 2 years, is learning to think in formats primarily rather than in like what I want to talk about. And I think in newsletters, it's something I've done badly in the past, and it's super important. Make a format that is going to be interesting, but that is going to make it easy for you to show up day after day or week after week with predictable input.
Yeah, I agree. I don't feel that obviously with the water coolest. I feel a little bit of pain when there's like a very slow news day, but that's fairly rare. You can always kind of dive a little bit deeper. Um, but I feel that pain even on like social media, right? It's like I try to be pretty active on LinkedIn, like giving tips and giving my thoughts on the newsletter industry. But it's like, yeah, it's like it's not a super sexy industry. There's not like a whole ton going on. There's kind of a few things that we say over and over again. So yeah, it is a grind sometimes to like really wake up and be like, okay, I'm going to write a LinkedIn post today about like something super valuable that can help potential newsletter operators, without either repeating yourself or just feeling like you're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel for sure.
Cool. Well, I think we have number 6 now. What is the last, the final, the most important, the most exciting mistake that newsletter operators make when they're starting out?
So I actually have a name for this one. This is called the biggest mistake people make, drum roll, is they fall for the morning brew fallacy. So this is trademarked by me. This is something that I came up with. And basically what I hear from a lot of folks is they think that if they build a newsletter, advertisers will come, right? So you
Mm.
build it and they will come. And so that's basically the entire plan that they have to make money off of a newsletter. Um, and I think I know it's getting increasingly harder to do that in 2026. And so a lot of people look back at the success of the Morning Brew in 2018, 2019, where I think that there was a time where that was the case, where if you built a newsletter with 100,000 plus subscribers, you could go and have conversations with real advertisers, and they were happy to throw you like true brand awareness dollars. And that just doesn't happen anymore. The numbers, we've talked about this a lot, the numbers have increased. I think I talked to an agency recently. They said that 100,000 threshold number is now probably closer to 250,000 before advertisers even want
I
to waste their
saw
time
is
talking to them.
Ezoic saying that to be approved on their network now, you have to have 250,000 monthly active users, whatever that means, but it's a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think my big takeaway here, and kind of the, let's call it the fix, is you need to think about upfront what business outcome your newsletter is meant to drive. Like, think about that before you do absolutely anything. Because if you just kind of say, well, I don't know, like I'll build it and then I'll monetize through ad networks or agencies, you are just going to be so disappointed by how much money you can make doing that, and how much it's like banging your head against the wall. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's really, really hard. So I would truly think about what you're going to do, whether the newsletter is a means to another end, whether you want to launch some other business off of it. Like, there's nothing wrong with having a newsletter where, to your point before, maybe you want to launch something down the road and you're just not sure what it is yet, but you want to build this audience and just show them that you're kind of a thought leader, or known in this space. I think that's fine, but I think you just need to be honest with yourself up front that that's the point, and you're not going to make money right away. This is going to be kind of a cost center. So I think just kind of looking yourself in the mirror, like, one on one, and being like, hey, what's the point of this newsletter? And not just what it's going to do for the readers, but what it's going to do for you, and like what the actual, business outcome of it,
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, I like that. I totally agree. I still see like a lot of newsletter operators who started in those days and who like started more recently, because it is something, if I were to criticize ad networks and like the more modern ESP platforms, which I think extends to Substack as well, even though they don't do ads yet, they sort of peddle the same illusion around paid subscriptions, which others like Beehive does with the ad network, Substack does this
Yeah.
with the subscriptions, which is that they do make it seem like you're going to make more money than you are probably going to make from those things. Like, I don't think it's a bad idea to start a Substack at all. I don't think it's a bad idea to start a newsletter on Beehive or anywhere. I do think it is a bad idea to start and expect that that's where your revenue is going to come from, because that probably does, like you said, it probably does mean you are scraping the bottom of the barrel. You are in, like, it's the it's the least effective way of monetizing a newsletter. It's like the last resort, basically.
Yeah, I mean, just to put it in perspective, I started the Water Coolest in 2017, and like, I would call that probably like the heyday of being able to monetize with advertisers. And I wasn't able to leave my full time job and live off of that for 2 years, right? So like, it was just 2 years of writing daily newsletters, and making a little bit of money to pay myself and my team. And so I can tell you it's a whole lot worse. The economics are a whole lot worse than they were back then. So yeah, it's a grind.
I mean, if you want to think about it this way, right? Like, if you take Substack, I don't know the exact most up to date numbers, but somewhere between 3 to 600 people make full time, like US based livable salaries from Substack directly. Probably a lot less than that. I think it could actually be 2 to 300, because some people make 2, 3, 4, 5 million a year. So actually, probably when you account for that, it was probably more like 2 or 300 people are actually making full time salaries from it. If you look at Beehive, the people building great newsletters on Beehive, but the monetization isn't coming from Beehive, right? Like, the amount of money Beehive makes from all of its users every year is significantly more than the amount that it pays to those users every year. Like, the subscription revenue they make is $20 to $30 million a year. They don't pay out anywhere near that across their ad network and paid subscriptions and boosts and stuff. Nowhere close to it. So, like, the idea that you're going to go to any of these platforms and that they're going to pay you meaningfully more than you are paying them is not true. At least not in 2026. It hasn't been true yet, and I don't see any sign that it's going to change at any point in the next couple of years. So you have to figure out monetization outside of those platforms.
I totally agree. Yeah, and just to be clear, like I don't think when I say like your business outcome that you need to think about, I don't necessarily even think it needs to be, financial or directly tied to revenue. Like there's some people who, like, I work with some, CEOs, like in B2B, they want it for like recruiting purposes, right?
Mhm.
Or they just want to be, more well known in the space so they can get on the speaking circuit, right? So they're kind of like using it. Obviously, that ends up leading hopefully to sales of their product. But I think there's other goals that you can have. So just like, truly thinking about, what the outcome is, or like, there's VC newsletters that they just want to be, get the deal flow coming in, things like that. So, yeah, I would just say don't fall for the morning brew fallacy. Go out, look yourself in the mirror, and be like, what the hell is the point of this thing?
And do it early. That's like when I look at the newsletter operators I've met who've become successful versus those who haven't. A big pattern, it's not everybody, some people do get lucky, but a big pattern amongst the ones I've seen that are successful is that they start thinking about monetization and trying to monetize from day one. And it doesn't have to be like, it can be as simple as like paid recommendations and welcome offers and stuff on the thank you page so that as new subscribers come through, you earn. But a lot of the time it's affiliates. It's, when you start the newsletter
Yeah.
from day one, if you have a newsletter about, I don't know, if it's a local newsletter, find a realtor to do a sponsored like House of the Week section in the newsletter from day one. You're not going to make much money from it, but pre-sell it for a year, right? There's a bunch of things you can do like that will, it's not about the amount of money you make from them in the early days. It's partly about the motivation and the responsibility to keep going because you've sold those things. And it's also partly about like we were talking about, right? People optimize for the wrong things a lot of the time. They're optimizing for opens and clicks and all this stuff. And like, if you're not selling early, if you're not selling ad space, if you're not trying to get people to sponsor the newsletter, if you're not trying to sell products in your newsletter, whether it's your product or someone else's, like those are the real signs of whether the newsletter is going to, like, whether you're building the right audience, whether what you're writing and the authority and the presence and the trust you have is the right thing. If you're not selling early, it's kind of like just sort of like setting out and driving and being like, right, let's drive for an hour before we check the map and see if we're going in the right direction. It's like, yeah, it seems like such a hack to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's a really good point and kind of brings everything full circle. I think optimizing for, getting replies and, kind of creating a one-on-one relationship with people is important. But actually, now that you say that, it's actually more important to, it's a much better North Star to be showing like outcomes, right? So not necessarily just, and that's why I actually love, I love like signing up for affiliate offers like super early, because one, like any affiliate program will let you in, right? Because it's no skin off their back. If they sell something, great. If they don't, whatever, they're no worse off. And it's so valuable for you because not only can you see if people click, like there's a big difference between somebody clicking, probably a bot, and someone actually taking action, and building that data and being like, hey, I drive sales to this company. And plus, the best thing about affiliate programs is typically you have some sort of dashboard where you can see exactly what type of sales you're driving. And that's something that's really hard to do. And a lot of advertisers won't give you information on when you're working with them directly on, kind of a more one-on-one sponsorship basis. So it's probably worth trying to optimize for that and like having that be, again, one of your kind of North Stars early on, because you can go out to a lot of people and say, hey, look at exactly what we're doing. We did it for this company and we can do it for you too.
Nice. I love that.
Cool. I think that's a great place to end. Did I miss anything? Any mistakes? I guess we could probably keep going for days.
We can keep going. Yeah, we can come back and do a round two at some point on this. I have a couple of ideas, but I think next week we're both going to be out at the newsletter. No, not newsletter. Was it New Media Summit?
Yes, NMS.
NMS in Austin. So we'll try and maybe get a second or a third in-person live pod in, and maybe a couple of guests as well.
All right, man. Cool. I appreciate it, and we'll chat soon. See you in Austin.
See you there. Have a good one.